Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Nomad World weekly series. I'm Becky, and once again, I'm going to be your host. And today, we're going to be talking about helping introverts communicate with more confidence with my guest, Sarah Mikutel. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Becky. It is so great to talk to you again.
Yes, you were a guest on my original podcast, The School of Travels. It's still available if people want to check that out on Apple Podcasts. But I wanted to talk with you. I know that you now specialize in helping introverts, and there's a lot of digital nomads out there that struggle with being introverted and having to sell themselves to keep getting clients. So I think this is a great thing we can discuss today. But before we do, I would love to hear more about your background as a remote worker.
Wow. Well, I guess I'll start how I'm from America. I've been living permanently abroad for since about 2010, but I've been traveling back and forth internationally since I was 18. And that's when I really got the travel and live abroad bug. So I was spent the summer when I was 18 working at an inn in the Lake District in England. And it was the most gorgeous place I had ever seen. Like, this is Beatrix Potter territory. And I was a chambermaid up there. So that meant got up really early. I had to make like serve breakfast to everybody and then clean all the rooms along with the other chambermaids. It was the hardest work I had ever done, but I completely fell in love with England. It was the first time, I traveled up to England. I went down to London and explored that city and just thought, "Oh yes, I have to live over here someday and make it a more permanent thing." So I finished up that summer. I went back and studied abroad in London. And then afterward, I was like, oh my gosh, how can I make living abroad possible? Because it seemed much easier for students for different visas that you could get that way. And so many years went by. I was living in New York City, and I discovered that through my ancestry, my Italian ancestry, I was eligible for dual citizenship with Italy. So I was like, great, this is my ticket to the European Union. So I started to gather all the documents, and I found a translator for the documents. And she said, you know what, it would be much easier if you just moved to Italy instead of trying to do everything here. Like, it could take years here, and the New York consulate, Italian consulate, rejects people all the time. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'm gonna move to Italy. So I packed up my life in New York City, bought a one-way ticket to Italy, and long story short, and I can talk to your listeners, feel free to contact me later. I've got my Italian citizenship in a few months, and I have been living abroad ever since. So this was in 2010, and so that's how I got to be living abroad and working remotely. So after living in Italy for a while, I decided to move to England. And I thought it'd be quite easy to get a job because, the saying in New York City, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And I found it really tough to get my foot in the door. And so I decided to go to different recruitment agencies. And they were the ones who helped me find work initially. And now post pandemic, it's easier to find remote work through them as well. So that's sort of how I got my foot in the door, living abroad and working remotely.
What an interesting story. I think we could do a whole podcast about how you discovered you had Italian ancestry and the journey of doing that. But like you said, listeners, reader, like feel free to contact Sarah because I have heard your story before and it's really interesting. And a few months is like unheard of usually with this kind of search for the family ancestry.
Yeah. It's probably, I think my passport is my most prized possession because it's opened so many doors and really changed the course of my life over the last, 15 years nearly.
Yeah. It's incredible once you start living in other places, as I know a lot of digital nomads can attest to. So now I'm curious, what are you now doing? I'm sure over many years you've done different things, but what is your focus these days with your remote work?
Yeah, so my background is communications. So I spent many years doing communication strategy, copywriting, and this is work that I'm still doing. But one of my biggest passions right now is communication coaching, specifically for Introverts. So Becky and you and I are both podcasters, and for a while I was also teaching people how to podcast. And I discovered that one of the biggest things that held people back wasn't the technology of podcasting. It was the fear of putting yourself out there and what if I sound dumb? And you just realize how much those mindset issues hold you back in all aspects of your life. And I would consider myself an introvert, and I remember being in corporate in my younger years and being really shy and not wanting to speak up in meetings because I was afraid of sounding dumb. And I've moved past that, and it's really important to me to help other fellow introverts get the confidence they need to make bolder moves in their life, whether they want to keep a corporate job, whether they want to pack up and move everything to another part of the world. You need to have the ability to advocate for yourself and to speak up and to take those chances. And so that's what I'm most passionate about right now.
I love it, and I have to say you're the first introvert coach I've been able to speak with personally. So I'm so curious what are some of the things you work with your clients, you work on?
Well, I would say mindset is number one. So we also talk about verbal techniques, like verbal and nonverbal, how to make yourself have a bigger presence and speak with a more resonant voice, and those more tactical things, and what structures you can put together for presentations to and like better storytelling and things like that. But it's really the mindset issue that has to come first to help people feel more confident speaking up. And this goes into, I'm very into Stoic philosophy, which is the foundation of modern cognitive behavioral therapy. So Stoicism is a 2,300-year-old philosophy. And at its core, it says, live your values, let go of things that are not in your control, and also be a good person who looks out for other people. But one of the great byproducts of Stoicism is more emotional resiliency and helping you to become a more courageous person. And that's by taking a look at your thoughts, taking a step back and examining the fears that you have, and then coming up with more rational thoughts and looking at things in a more rational way. Because when we get caught up in our fears, we get hyper fixated on them and we start to lose our perspective of what's really going on here. So, going back to somebody being nervous in a meeting, a lot of times we have this anxiety and we don't even take a moment to explore what we're worried about. So I help my clients take a pause and say, okay, well, you're nervous. This is a natural thing. What are you nervous about? And as we dig deeper, like maybe the first level is, all right, well, I'm worried that they're going to think that I'm stupid. But as we start to unpack this and I'm asking questions, they realize, oh, I actually have a good rapport with my colleagues. And, my performance reviews say that I'm doing an excellent job. And so getting them to understand, like, all right, you've already built a body of evidence of looking smart in front of these people. Like, even if you did say something that was quote unquote dumb, that is not going to undo the entire relationship that you have with these people. So it's all about being mindful about the reality of the situation and challenging that initial, more irrational thought that, like, if I say one dumb thing or if I'm not perfect in every situation, then everything is going to fall apart in my life.
That is so helpful for the rest of their lives, and I think if you identify that you have these issues as an introvert and you find someone like you, it could really transform your life if you work on these things, like you said, mindset first.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And even, extroverts as well. And I say introvert, not all introverts are shy, but I would say a lot of them are. So when I'm talking about introvert, I mean people who are a little bit more on the shyer side, just because I guess introvert is kind of a more trendy word. Not all of us want to admit to being shy. Uh, so when I say introvert, I'm talking more about the introverts who are on the shyer side and have a little bit more of a fear of putting themselves out there.
I was actually talking with an introvert this morning, Sarah, and she said the classic line, I'm sure you've heard this, many people have felt this. She said, I really struggle with selling myself. And she's actually
Yeah.
trying to apply for a job, many jobs right now on LinkedIn. What advice do you have for people who really struggle with the sales part? Because it often feels like sales is so much of the world right now. You have to be good at that.
Yeah. I would say, you can't expect other people to believe in you more than you believe in yourself. So you really have to believe in what you're offering the world. And I would say focus on the contribution you're making. And that's another thing that I talk about with my clients. A lot of times, and let's just go back to speaking up in meetings, we feel like what we're going to say is a performance review and that we're standing on stage ready for people to throw stones at us. And it's really sort of separating ourselves from the situation. And what we should really be thinking about is how can I contribute? How am I adding value? And thinking about, I'm just going to throw the word love out there. Like, what love can you cultivate, or whatever positive emotion you want to generate for this situation? Like, all right, I love these colleagues. How can I add value to their day today and take the drama out of it? It's kind of egocentric when you're putting everything on you and like all eyes are on me. Try to think of it more as a two-way conversation, and this is what I'm adding, and I have something to contribute. And, even if what you say isn't the quote unquote perfect thing, add contributing to the dialogue is going to help other people generate ideas as well.
Yeah. I think that, also I'd be curious about your thoughts on this. Like how valuable is it to express that you're feeling vulnerable? Like maybe an introvert could be almost posing as an extrovert, or they're hiding a lot of that. In a corporate situation or, with our remote work colleagues, is it helpful to say, "Hey, I'm nervous about this, but I'm gonna talk about this now," or I don't know if that would help or make people form more of a rapport with each other.
If you are giving a presentation and it's your first time, I think it's fine to say, "Whew, I'm a little bit nervous, but, I'm really excited to be here." But you mentioned something about people masquerading as extroverts, and I don't think you need to pretend to be somebody you're not. But I think we do have to up-level our skills a little bit and be more verbal at work, because we do have contributions to make. And a lot of times we think that the work that we do speaks for itself. And I see this is where I see a lot of introverts get in trouble, whether they have their own business or they're working for somebody else. Like, oh, well, if I do great work, then obviously people will just know and recognize and and promote me. And that's not necessarily true. People are busy, they really don't know what's going on in your world. And unless you talk about it, it doesn't mean you have to be a bragger, but you do have to discuss like things that you have achieved and accomplished. And you can do it in a way where you're excited and it's part of like a group effort. But like, how did you contribute to this group effort? You have to be able to talk about what you do because people don't know. So never assume that people know what you're working on. They don't know.
Yeah. Would you advocate for like writing? Because I know a lot of introverts, they are good writers and it feels comfortable for them to do that. If someone like my friend is trying to find work and using LinkedIn, would it be helpful to write some LinkedIn posts, like you said, also talking about what they're contributing to that industry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say whatever you can do to advocate for yourself, like LinkedIn posts would be great, of course. But it's also important to be able to have that discussion either with your manager, or I think it's very important to show your face online on social media. And I guess this is where I differ from some people who will say, just be you. And if you don't want to show up anywhere, then that's fine. I would say you do need to show up because it's important for people to know who you are and they want to connect with you as a human being. And again, it's not about like elevating yourself above anyone else. It's just elevating yourself to be equal to other people and feeling that what you have to say is of value. And I would say another thing that introverts love, and I would say I'm in this boat too. I love to listen to other people's stories. I love to listen more than I contribute. And I think a lot of books say, yeah, you should listen more than you contribute. And I think a lot of those books are written by extroverts because while listening is important, I find that some introverts take that as like permission to not contribute ever and to just be quiet, and then conversations can become more like a job interview, especially when it comes to dating. So I would say it's important for introverts to be mindful, like, yes, listen, ask good questions, but also you need to contribute your story as well. And not everybody knows how to have a conversation or how to ask questions. So if you're in a conversation with somebody and they're not asking you questions back, it's important to contribute your side of things as well.
That reminds me of a podcast I heard where someone mentioned that their propensity to ask other people a lot of questions, I think they were also a podcast host, was a way, yeah, to dodge them, having to be vulnerable and having to be in the spotlight. And so you're right, reevaluate for those listening. How often are you doing this? And you mentioned dating, it could start to really change how you're interacting and putting yourself out there and connecting. So that's
Well,
really
yeah,
important.
because relationships are a two-way street, and part of personal growth is stepping out of your comfort zone. So when I started to share more of myself, especially in conversations, I did find it more emotionally taxing because for me, it's just felt like a luxurious blanket to just sit and listen and and not have to do much else. And
A
I
heavy
and
weighted
I
blanket.
yeah, yeah, it felt so cozy. Uh, but then people aren't learning anything about you, and how much do they really know you if you're not contributing to the conversation and to the relationship? And so I do think it's really important to share your side of things as well.
Yes, yeah. Oh, okay, now, maybe more concrete tips here. I sometimes love to get these concrete examples. So I once attended a Toastmasters meetup and gave a speech spontaneously on a stage. I was terrified. Do you know, I mean, Toastmasters has been around for a really long time. Do you know of any more updated, even remote possibilities where people can get together and like practice being more extroverted or doing things that scare them, like speaking on stage or public speaking?
I think Toastmasters is still a great organization to join. So I am actually not a member yet, but it is something that I have been saying like, okay, I want to participate in more Toastmasters type of events. So I would say still check that out. And I know they have remote ones available as well. I would also say explore improv classes. So that is something that I tried, and my heart was jumping, like, literally, I felt like I could see my heart beating before the first few classes, to be honest with you. Uh, I did get quite nervous about this because you'll be put in all these sort of random situations where you don't know what's coming, and you'll have to speak spontaneously, and, it's exposure therapy, so the more you do it, like, the easier it becomes to just speak off the cuff and just be silly and a little bit more playful than what you might normally be in your life. So I would say definitely try to find an improv class, and I'm sure there are ones available online, but if you can go in person, it's a completely different dynamic, and it's more physical, in how people perform, but that's a great way to just get out of your own head.
Yes, I can attest. I also was terrified attending my first improv class, but I have experienced very few things that give me such a high at the end. Like you really start to feel many things are possible and there are many doors that can be opened in your life as you get more creative and in the moment and interact with people.
Yeah, and the vulnerability that opens up in that class is quite interesting. So I did a class last year, and I'm still hanging out with the people from that class. We have dinner parties quite frequently, and I just feel find that to be kind of unusual as adults. Yeah, sometimes you do a class, like maybe you're doing a painting class, you're doing, whatever, different kinds of like activities to try new things, maybe to meet new people. But often, even if you have a good rapport, you don't generally stay in touch with those people in such a real way. And for this class, we're still friends. And so I just think it was quite a unique experience.
Yeah, I've also attended quite a few digital nomad conferences where improv has become part of it, even just the improv games you do at the beginning of a lot of these classes. So I can tell it's definitely a vehicle that's becoming more and more popular to help people
Yeah,
connect. I have a question for you, Sarah. Have you ever tried contact improv?
I haven't. I can imagine what this might be, but tell me more, Becky.
I've not gone to a full class, but I recently tried it for the first time. For introverts, it is a new level because, as you might imagine, it involves making contact with different parts of your body with someone else. It's almost like a dance class. But if
Okay.
you're the kind of person that also is inhibited or an introvert with like making physical touch or in this way, and it could really be connected to future dating opportunities perhaps, but you make contact or keep contact with one part of the body, with the other person, and you kind of just follow each other like a dance. It in some ways resembles a bit of partner dancing, where one person will lead and the other is following, but you can take turns, and it feels a lot like lower stakes than you need to know certain steps because it's just moving with the flow, and that's the improv side of it.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna remember that. And that's you're just sparking something else. So that's something else that I experiment with sometimes. Salsa classes, bachata classes, as these types of dances have leaders and followers, and women are typically the followers. And so that's been a great experience for me to just let go and let somebody else take the lead and really having to just allow my body to follow what they're doing rather than trying to anticipate the next move. And that's another thing about communications, really focusing on what the other person is saying rather than trying to anticipate the next move.
Yeah, it may seem, because when I first hear that, it sounds a bit more like being an introvert is like following and not being the one, like we were talking about with communication, leading the conversation.
Mhm.
But yeah, you learn things from both sides, and it's important to pick up those things that are helpful on both sides of the
Well, I
equation.
think when you're trying to I would say something that helped me let go of is you how am I going to describe this? I just felt myself more in a flow than normal because at first I was like, all right, how are we doing this? How is this going to be like the exact right way? And when I let go of that, and I also found when I closed my eyes, it was easier to just, all right, I'm just going to trust that this person knows what they're doing. And even if they don't, I'm just going to go with it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but this is going to help us be more smooth if I let go of trying to like make sure everything is great.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I loved about contact improv because I'm always worried about my posture when it comes to partner dancing. And with this, it was just following the length of someone's arm and then move. It kind of became more of this action. And
Yeah.
I was at first also, my first dance partner was a woman. She introduced it to me, and I was not used to dancing with another woman. And I was like, okay, this is like, again, I think with introverts coming out of your shell, it's all about put yourself in these different situations that scare you or that are
Yeah.
unfamiliar. And with enough of this in different fields, it's going to overall make you more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And also we get in our heads that we have to look a certain way or we don't want to look dumb. We want to be we want to come off in a good manner. And do you realize that even if you end up doing something silly in an improv class, like who cares? The stakes are so much lower than what we think they are.
Yes. And people are there to catch you. People also want to see you succeed much more than
Yeah.
you may think they
Oh,
do. Because
100%. Yeah.
especially with public
Again,
speaking, the
exactly.
group.
I was just good. Exactly. I was just gonna say that, like, people want you to succeed, and they also want to have a good experience themselves, and if you go on stage and are acting really nervous and awkward, like the whole rest of the world is riding on your shoulders, other people are gonna feel that and feel kind of u uneasy. But if you go on stage, even if you're nervous, if you can remember like, "Okay, I'm nervous, but this is a normal interaction, and I know within a few seconds my nerves are gonna calm down. I'm here for a reason. I have something to share. I'm excited about sharing this." That's a completely different energy, and your audience is going to feel a completely different way.
Absolutely. You're making me think of another thing that I think for me is like biggest stakes, like getting out of my shell. Haven't tried it before. Have you ever gone on stage and tried to do a stand-up comedy routine?
I haven't reached that level yet. No, I haven't.
Either, but that would be something that, I'm very judgmental about myself with, and I'm like, "I'm not that funny," but I know, like, even digital nomads that have, tried to make this part of their career and, it was a step-by-step process, but, that's another thing you can try. If you're like, "Wow, what can really push me out of my shell and make me fail on stage," but see that people are there to help you and they wanna see you succeed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's definitely top tier, something to potentially aspire to.
Yeah, I'm gonna do more contact improv first, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna sign up for my first contact improv class. I'm gonna actually make a note of that.
Yeah, me too. I wanna do it more than I did it at a festival the first time, and I'd love to
Uh,
get a full class and see the different elements of it. So for those of you watching or listening, we've mentioned many things here. Let us know what you're interested in and what you haven't tried before, what you'd like to try first. So Sarah, thank you so much for explaining more about how introverts can, improve their communication and their confidence. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we go?
hmm. Well, I guess, before we started talking going into this communication conversation, I was thinking about stoicism, um, in case we talked more about that. And what I was gonna say then, and I think it's still applicable, is uh today we hear a lot of that we're living in unprecedented times, that the world is completely crazy. And I would just say the world has always been crazy. If you look at the history of the world, there has always been war. There have always been insane things happening. I think social media and the news make it seem like the world's much more awful, but it's not. The world's always been crazy, but we can't control all of our external circumstances, but what we can control is our own thoughts, how we show up in the world, the types of people we choose to be. So we can choose to show up with good character, to look out for other people, to choose to be the kind of people who step out of their comfort zone and want to try something new, whether that be speaking up more, whether that be becoming a digital nomad or permanently moving to a new country. It's up to us to flex those muscles, and that is what's in our control. So the world might always be a little bit chaotic, but we can choose to practice having a calm mind and showing up for ourselves and for other people.
Beautifully said, and so important to remember. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, is there if people wanna follow you, where can they go? And also, if you wanna mention your podcast, that would be great too. You have such a lovely voice for podcasts.
Oh, thank you, Becky. I have a podcast called Live Without Borders and recently started a Substack of the same name. I'm thinking about changing it to Citizens of the World just because the Stoics consider themselves to be citizens of the world. And I just mentioned that because I feel like your audience would probably resonate with that as well. And I just love the idea of thinking of the world as one big family and that we're all connected to each other and we're not bound to loving or caring about people from a specific place. I really think that life should go beyond that. But anyway, for right now, my podcast is called Live Without Borders. And I'm also on Instagram at Sarah Mikutel. And my website, sarahmikutel.com.
All right, we're going to put the links to all of that in our description. And Sarah, I wish you all the best with your coaching and your podcast. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Becky, and I can't wait to see you in person in England.
Yes, me too. Can't wait. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.